and that here's a strange surviving fragment of a whole alternate background for Paul. I think the persecution thing came from a late misunderstanding of the Jewish Christian Ebionite or whatever polemic against Paul, that he was opposing the true Christian faith, namely theirs, Torah Christianity, and that in time, once you had this, as Bauer says, Catholicizing rapprochement, people began to think, oh, you mean Paul actually physically persecuted the Christians, and not thinking that it was just that he opposed Torah Christianity. I don't think he was a persecutor of Christians any more than I think Peter denied Jesus. I think these are the polemical smears of both sides in that conflict.
Besides 1 Corinthians 15, then, do you think that both Galatians 1 and Philippians 3, where Paul tells these things, do you think they're both bogus or interpolation?
Well, yeah, Philippians is plainly, in my opinion, a kind of a fourth pastoral epistle. It's a famous last words thing filled with literary irony, presuming that the reader knows Paul died as a martyr, and that...
in Galatians 1, 2, you say the same thing?
Galatians has more of a claim, in my opinion, to be authentic. But again, as I said an hour ago, I'm way out in left field because I accept Steck and Van Manen and these guys saying I don't think Galatians is kosher either.
Well,
if you have $50, you might want to check out my pre-Nicene New Testament, where I go into all these crazy views. You can get it for $36 on Amazon. I wish I had extra copies to send you, but if anybody's insane enough to be interested in my crazy theories, you can find them all spewed out in that book.
Bob, one thing I like, I mean, you are very honest about the fact that virtually no living person agrees with you. I mean, I know there's a few here and there, but I find it strange that hearing your arguments, because you go to ARSBL and you're in the Jesus Seminar and you have access to these mainline guys, on the left, who do these sorts of things. How come you haven't won them over if they are already predisposed to give up what you give up?
Say that again. Predisposed to give up what I give up.
A lot of your colleagues in the mainline scholarship, AARSBL, even some of your folks in the Jesus Seminar who are not known for being very conservative, when those people are predisposed to say what, to want to say, for their first volume, one of their presuppositions is there's no such thing as resurrection. Okay, when they're predisposed to saying some of those things, I'm curious on why you think you haven't convinced almost anybody, even people who... Now again, I want to make sure, truth is not a head count proposition, but I'm saying...
No, that's what you're assuming here.
No.
You're trying to throw me off the track and say no. That's clearly what you're saying.
No. Let me clearly tell you why I'm not saying that. I'm saying head count doesn't determine truth, okay? But why wouldn't you be able to use these arguments and convince folks who are very close to you ideologically, who already reject many of the things you reject, and you do have an audience with them? I'm not asking head count. I'm asking, why isn't this head count persuaded by arguments?
I don't know that very many of them have ever bothered to read any of my junk. I mean, I have no reason to think
we would need to ask them, wouldn't we?
Pardon?
We would need to ask his colleagues that you're referring to.
Well, I guess we would, but what I mean is that they rub shoulders with Bob regularly, whether it's Jesus Seminar or AARSBL, and they see these arguments are out there. And, I
don't know. They may never have read them, but I don't mean to say I'm sure they would fall in line immediately if they did. But I know at the Jesus Seminar, when we had the Paul Seminar, when Darrell Dowdy and I both began to argue this way, we were looked at as if we were insane, and they started measuring us for straitjackets.
That's my point. You know what, Bob? Might be real strange about this? Maybe you're read more by evangelicals than you are by those guys.
Could be. I wouldn't be surprised. In Kuhn's famous thing, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, he talks about how normative science is going to fight to the death to keep a hold of the regnant paradigm, and it's a good thing that they do, because you don't want any new proposal to win too easily. You want it to prove itself and win its spurs in fighting against the old paradigm and trying to show how it can do a better job. And it can't show that if it's just accepted right off the bat. So it takes a long time, and because the old people have, the older scholars, the establishment, have done all their work with the game defined by certain rules, and they're not eager to throw the rules out. It doesn't mean they're acting in bad faith. We want them to act that way. That's how the game is played and how a victory of a new theory is going to mean anything worthwhile. So it might be that that's what's going on, but then again, any scientific creationist or chiropractor or Velikovsky could say the same thing, so, and that doesn't prove a thing, but that's what I'm guessing.
It doesn't prove anything. I'm just curious why people who would take this move if they thought it was. I mean, I can't. Mike knows Elaine Pagels, Mike, or Bart Ehrman, or
this really isn't on the topic of resurrection, though. I'd really like to get back to Bob's reason.
Go right ahead.
We kind of we've already gone 85 minutes. We need to be wrapping it up pretty shortly here. So we have any.
Nice, and you're having fun.
Yeah, if we have any final thoughts, we could probably go ahead and go through those.
Bob, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just think it's fascinating to keep the stuff around. That's the only way anybody, especially me, learns anything. And I'm just so tickled that you gents want to do that. I think it's a great experience, and I'd love to have more and more of it.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mike.
This was fun, Bob.
Hey, Mike, do you pastor a church in Marietta?
I do not. I work for I'm a director at the North American Mission Board, which is part of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay. You mentioned something.
How much are you doing your dissertation on, Mike?
I'm doing it on historiography and the resurrection of Jesus. So a little nuanced approach I'm taking is I'm trying to. I've spent several years now studying just literature written by professional historians and how they actually do history and how they actually approach texts. How they come to historical knowledge. What is historical knowledge? When can you? What kind of criteria and processes do you have to go through in order to actually do a historical investigation? What criteria must be met? What kind of confidence do you have to have before something a historian is justified or warranted in saying, well, this occurred in the past? And when they say that, what exactly do they mean by that? Because everything is held provisionally. So been looking at that and just reading hundreds of articles and many, many books on the topic. So I've looked at and arrived at my historiography and how I'm going to approach things historically speaking. And to be honest with you, I know I'm the only one who could really verify this, but I've tried my best to realize that I have a very real bias. Having been brought up in a Christian family, going to a Christian university, involved in Christian ministry, that I have a bias. I want it to be true. Is that even possible to overcome? I don't think so. But how do you minimize it? Everybody has biases. It doesn't matter what you believe. Everybody has their bias. Everybody is plagued by that or hindered by it. How do you, in a sense, transcend that to a point where you can have some sort of, although not complete, at least you can have some sort of workable objectivity to come and look at these kind of texts, to look at the data. That's been hard for me to do. It's been something I've really, really wrestled with.
It's a tough question.
And then looking at what the data is and then applying the method, which I've spent so much time looking at and what kind of method is to be used, to apply that method to the data. And so that's what my dissertation's on.
I wonder if the last thing you said is not an even more interesting dissertation topic.
Of applying the method.
The will to believe. How can you set that? How can you bracket that while you're wearing this other hat?
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob. It's tough. I mean, one thing I look at, well, what if I came to the conclusion in the studies that Jesus didn't rise from the dead? Then I lose my good job.
But wouldn't it just be that you were losing the ability to claim on historic evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, while you would still obviously be able to believe in it by faith?
Would you say that again? I'm sorry.
I mean, at most it would seem like you would lose the ability to claim on historic grounds that Jesus rose from the dead, but you would still maintain the ability to believe so by faith.
Unless, that's a good point, unless there was an alternative hypothesis that seemed better, that it was a more plausible explanation than the resurrection hypothesis. Then we'd look at that and say, well, is that better? Was it a hallucination? Or let's just say, because I'm not done my dissertation yet, I haven't got to the point of actually sitting down and really weighing through each of these hypotheses using the methods. I mean, I could do that on a simplistic level, but have I really done it in this doctoral research? I haven't done that yet. So what if I got to the point and I said, okay, well, let's consider Bob's hypothesis here about how this is all just myth. And I looked at that and I said, wow, yeah, that just seems to fit the facts better. It fits the data better than the resurrection hypothesis. Well, then how could I continue to believe that Jesus was risen from the dead? It'd be difficult to do in my judgment.
That's true. Honestly, that's not what happened to me, but I was actually a Bible and theology major at the university up in Cleveland, Tennessee, before I left Christianity.
Were you in a Tomlinson church background? Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee?
Actually, the church I came out of, the pastor came out of a Church of God background. He had kind of moved to a sort of non-denominational stance, but yeah.